It was 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night when my buzzer rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but there they were on the security monitor, my parents Robert and Susan and my sister Chloe. They didn't look like they were visiting, they looked like they were invading. I buzzed them in. They walked into my renovated Wicker Park loft without a hello. My mother set her purse on my quartz island like she was claiming territory. "Grace, we have a situation," my father said, his eyes scanning the exposed brick and industrial beams of the home I'd spent 5 years paying for. "Chloe is overwhelmed." "She needs a reset," my mother added, her voice trembling with that practice fragility she used to disarm me. "Her studio apartment is stifling her. She needs a change of environment to get her life back on track." I looked at Chloe. She was 25, 4 years younger than me and currently picking at a loose thread on my vintage sofa. She looked bored. Not overwhelmed. Bored. "Okay," I said slowly. "So help her find a new place." "We have," my father said. "Here." The air in the room seemed to vanish. "Excuse me. We want you to swap homes with Chloe for 6 months," my mother said, as if suggesting we swap appetizers. "You're strong, Grace. You can handle the studio. It's efficient. Chloe needs this." She gestured vaguely at the 20-foot ceilings, the wall of rare orchids, the $650,000 sanctuary I had built with my own 2 hands. "She needs space to breathe. To heal." They weren't asking. The entitlement hung heavy and suffocating in the room. They were demanding I vacate my own life because my sister was fragile. Because I was the strong one, the one who could endure discomfort so Chloe wouldn't have to. "You're serious," I said. It wasn't a question. "It's just 6 months," Chloe piped up, her voice small engineered for sympathy. "I just need to clear my head, Grace. You're never even here. You're always working." "My work is here," I said, pointing to the living wall. "This isn't decoration, Chloe. This is my portfolio. These plants are worth more than your car." "Material things," my father scoffed. "We're talking about family mental health. We're talking about your sister's well-being. Are you really going to put plants over people?" The audacity was breathtaking. It was a raid. A hostile takeover framed as a charity mission. They expected me to fold. They expected me to pack a bag and hand over the keys because that's what I'd always done. I was the shock absorber. The buffer between Chloe and reality. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't blink. I didn't let the familiar wave of guilt wash over me. I looked at my father, then at my mother, and finally at Chloe, who was already eyeing my espresso machine. The clarity was sudden and absolute. This wasn't a family. This was a parasite, and its hosts looking for a fresh vein. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "I'm checking my calendar," I lied. I opened the smart home app. I navigated to the guest accesses tab. There were 3 codes listed: Mom and Dad, Chloe, and Emergency. I tapped delete on the first one, then the second. "Grace," Chloe said, her voice losing its bored edge. "I'm deleting your digital keys," I said, my voice flat. "Effective immediately?" "You can't do that," my father sputtered. "We helped you. You co-signed a loan 7 years ago that I refinanced out of 3 years ago." I cut him off. "My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. This is my home. And you are leaving." I walked to the front door and held it open. The hallway stretched out behind me, empty and waiting. "Grace, be reasonable," my mother pleaded, switching tactics from demand to guilt. "Chloe is in crisis." "Chloe is 25, I said. "And if she's overwhelmed, she can go to therapy. She cannot have my loft." "You're being cruel," my father said, his face reddening. "After everything we've done for you. Get out." I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The command was absolute. They stared at me, shocked by the sudden wall where a doormat used to be. Slowly muttering about selfishness and ingratitude, they filed out. Chloe shot me a look of pure venom before disappearing into the elevator. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the secondary lock I'd installed myself. I leaned against the heavy steel door and listened to the silence. It wasn't a triumph. It was a diagnosis. I walked back to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were still steady, but my mind was racing, replaying the last 20 years. Why had they thought this would work? Why did they assume I would just hand over my life? Because I always had. It's a phenomenon psychologists call the trap of normalized cruelty. When you grow up in a house where one child is the golden idol and the other is the sacrifice, you don't realize the dynamic is abusive. You think it's gravity. You think it's just how the world works. Chloe was the fragile one. She was allergic to consequences. If she failed a test, the teacher was mean. If she wrecked a car, the road was slick. If she was broke, the economy was unfair. And I was the capable one, the strong one, which was just code for the one we don't have to worry about. My independence wasn't celebrated. It was exploited. It was a resource they mined to patch the holes Chloe punched in their lives. I looked at my vertical garden. The Monstera deliciosa, the rare philodendrons, the delicate orchids I'd spent thousands importing and acclimating. This wasn't just a hobby. I was a landscape architect. This wall was my living resume. It was how I landed clients. It was my professional credibility hanging on a trellis. And they wanted to hand it over to a woman who had killed a cactus. They didn't see my work. They saw a luxury they felt entitled to redistribute. I realized then that I hadn't just evicted my family. I had declared war on the entire architecture of our relationship. And I knew with a sinking certainty that they wouldn't just walk away. You don't take away a parasite's food source without a fight. The silence lasted exactly 12 hours. By the next morning, my phone was a war zone. My father sent texts that were masterpieces of gaslighting. We're just disappointed you've lost your way. Family helps family, Grace. When did you become so cold? My mother left voicemails that sounded like eulogies. She wept about how I was breaking the family apart, how Chloe was inconsolable, how I was punishing them for loving me. Not once did she mention the audacity of asking me to vacate my own home. It was all about my reaction, never their action. I didn't respond. I archived the messages and went to work. I had a site visit for a corporate rooftop garden, a project that demanded total focus. For 48 hours, I lived in the bliss of professional competence where boundaries were respected and contracts meant something. I came home late Thursday night. The hallway smelled like burnt toast and silence. I reached for my phone to unlock the door, but before I could tap the screen, I noticed something. The door was already unlocked. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Stale beer. Cheap perfume. And something earthy like damp soil. Chloe, I called out, my voice echoing in the dark. Laughter drifted from the living room. I flipped the switch. My loft was unrecognizable. There were red cups everywhere. A stranger was passed out on my rug. Music thumped from a Bluetooth speaker that wasn't mine. And then I saw the wall. My vertical garden. My portfolio. It was decimated. Vines had been ripped down, lying in tangled heaps on the floor. The rare orchids, the ones I'd hand-pollinated, were crushed underfoot. Soil was smeared across the white epoxy floor like a dirty protest. Chloe was sitting on my kitchen counter, a bottle of my expensive wine in her hand. She looked up, her eyes glassy. "Oh, hey," she slurred. "We were just blowing off steam. You were so mean the other day, Grace. I needed this." "You broke in," I whispered. "I used the emergency key," she said, dangling a small brass key I'd given my father 5 years ago. "Dad gave it to me. Said you were just being dramatic and you'd get over it." She hopped off the counter, stumbling slightly. She gestured to the ruined garden. "Oops. Sorry about your weeds. Some of the guys got a little rowdy." I stood there frozen. My brain was screaming at me to move, to act, to do something. But my body wouldn't obey. It's called the survivor's invisible chains. It's that paralyzing hesitation that grips you when you have to strike back at the people who share your DNA. Even when they are hurting you, even when they are destroying everything you love. The programming runs deep. Protect the family, don't make a scene, fix it. I looked at the destroyed orchids. I looked at my sister, who was smirking, daring me to escalate. She knew the programming. She was counting on it. She knew I would clean up the mess, yell a little, and then let it go because that's what I always did. I felt the urge to grab a broom, to usher the strangers out politely, to cover for her. Then, I looked at the soil on the floor. It looked like blood against the white. Get out, I said. Relax, Grace Chloe laughed. It's just plants. I said get out, my voice cracked, then hardened. Or what, she sneered. You going to call Mom? No, I said. The invisible chains snapped. The hesitation evaporated, replaced by a cold, clinical rage. I didn't grab a broom. I grabbed my phone. I didn't call our mother. I dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? I'd like to report a break-in. I said, my eyes locked on Chloe's face as her smirk faltered. There are intruders in my home. Significant property damage. I do not feel safe. Grace, stop, Chloe hissed, stepping forward. It's me. I turned my back on her. Yes, the intruders are still here. Please hurry. The police arrived in 8 minutes. They cleared the loft with professional efficiency. The strangers scattered like roaches. Chloe tried to play the "It's my sister's place" card, but without a lease, a key that wasn't hers, and a homeowner stating clearly that she was trespassing. The officers weren't interested in family dynamics. They escorted her out. She wasn't arrested. I declined to press charges that night, a final flickering ember of mercy, but she was removed. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I looked at the ruin of my work, and I felt a shift in my soul. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a crime scene. I picked up my phone again. It was 2 a.m. I called Ryan. Ryan was a corporate attorney, a shark in a tailored suit, and a friend from college who had watched my family drain me for years. He picked up on the second ring. Grace, is everything okay? I need to hire you, I said. Not as a friend. On retainer. Tell me. I explained the break-in. The key. The damage. I want to sever everything, Ryan. I want a full forensic audit of my life. If my father gave her that key, what else do they have access to? I want deeds checked, bank accounts, frozen passwords changed. I want to know exactly how deep the rot goes. Consider it done. Ryan said, his voice shifting into professional gear. I'll run a full credit sweep and asset check first thing in the morning. Grace, are you safe? I've never been safer, I said. Because I'm finally treating them like the liability they are. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I hired a locksmith. The locks were drilled out and replaced with high-security cylinders. I called my bank and flagged my accounts for fraud monitoring. I changed every digital password I owned to a random string of alphanumeric chaos. I was methodical. I was precise. I was no longer a daughter. I was a plaintiff preparing a case. My parents were calling, of course. My mother left hysterical messages about how I had humiliated Chloe, how the police presence was a stain on the family name. I didn't listen to them. I forwarded the audio files to Ryan. Evidence. By noon, the loft was secure. I started the cleanup. I cataloged every damaged plant, taking photos and estimating the replacement value. It was over $12,000 in stock alone, not counting the labor hours lost. I added it to a spreadsheet. At 4 p.m, Ryan called. Grace, can you come to my office? Did you find something? Yes, he said. The gravity in his voice made me pause. We need to talk. In person? I drove to his office in the Loop, my mind racing. What could he have found? A secret credit card, a joint account I'd forgotten to close. I walked into his glass-walled conference room. Ryan was sitting at the head of the table, a file folder in front of him. He didn't stand up to hug me. He looked grim. Sit down, Grace. Saturday. How bad is it? It's not just the key, Ryan said. I ran a comprehensive credit report. 3 bureaus. He slid a piece of paper across the polished mahogany. I looked at the highlighted line. Loan type small business divided by commercial status. Default divided by collections. Amount $45,000, date opened 3 years ago. I don't understand, I said, frowning. I never took out a business loan. I bootstrapped my firm. I know, Ryan said gently. You didn't sign this. Then who did? The co-signer listed is you, Ryan said. But the primary applicant is Chloe. The room seemed to tilt. Chloe, I whispered. But she can't. She doesn't have my information. She has your social security number, Ryan said. Probably from tax documents or old school forms your parents kept. But Grace, it gets worse. He slid another document across the table. It was a copy of the loan application. It was digital. The signature at the bottom was a clumsy approximation of mine. But my eyes were drawn to the contact information section. Primary contact email robert.foster@email.com. My father's email address. The loan is in default, Ryan said, his voice clinical but laced with anger. It's been in collections for 6 months. The notices weren't coming to you. They were going to your father. I stared at the email address. The betrayal wasn't sharp, it was heavy, crushing. It wasn't just theft, it was a conspiracy. They knew, I said. The realization landed like a physical weight. Chloe took out a loan in my name to fund that stupid boutique idea she had 3 years ago. The one that failed in 6 months. And when she stopped paying Ryan, continued, the bank started emailing the cosigner. Your father. He's been receiving collection notices for months. He hid them, I said, my voice trembling. He hid them from me. To protect her, Ryan said. If you found out, you might have reported it. You might have pressed charges. By hiding the notices, by keeping you in the dark, he was protecting Chloe from the consequences of felony identity theft. And protecting himself, I added. He knew. He allowed it. The pieces fell into place. The desperation to get me out of the loft. The demand to swap homes. It wasn't just about Chloe needing a reset. If Chloe moved into my loft, I said, connecting the dots, she would have access to my mail. My physical mail. If the bank escalated to sending letters to my home address, she could intercept them. Exactly, Ryan said. They were trying to move her into the firewall. They needed to control the information flow because the dam was about to break. I felt sick. Nauseous. My parents hadn't just favored my sister. They had sacrificed my financial future to cover up her crimes. They were willing to let my credit score burn, let me face potential lawsuits, let me lose everything just to keep their golden child from facing reality. This is a felony, Ryan said softly. Identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy. I know. If we report this, he said, Chloe goes to prison. Your parents could be charged as accomplices. I looked at the documents. I looked at the forged signature. I thought about my father calling me selfish. I thought about my mother crying about family unity. They didn't protect me, I said. They fed me to the wolves. What do you want to do? I stood up. The sickness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the prosecutor. I want to draft a document, I said. An assumption of debt and admission of guilt. Ryan nodded, understanding immediately. Leverage. No, I said. An ultimatum. Draw it up. I'm inviting them over for dinner. I sent the text at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm ready to talk. Come to the loft at 7. We can figure out a solution for Chloe. It was bait. And they took it hook, line, and sinker. They arrived at 5 minutes past 7. My father Robert walked in with the smug expression of a man who thinks he's won a battle of wills. My mother Susan looked relieved, clutching a plastic container of lasagna like a peace offering. Chloe brought up the rear, looking sulky but victorious, her eyes already scanning the room, probably mentally rearranging my furniture. I didn't let them sit on the sofa. I directed them to the dining table. I sat at the head. Ryan sat to my right. And Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, the family matriarch, and the only person I trusted to witness this, sat to my left. I had called her an hour ago. She had come without hesitation. Who is this? My father asked, eyeing Ryan suspiciously. My lawyer, I said. Lawyer Chloe laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. Grace, don't be so dramatic. We're just swapping apartments. We're not swapping anything, I said. I didn't offer them water. I didn't smile. I slid a black folder across the polished wood table. Open it? My father hesitated, then flipped it open. He saw the police report for the break-in first. Then the photos of the destroyed garden. His face hardened. We can discuss damages, he said dismissively. Chloe was upset. We can deduct it from... Keep reading, I said. He turned the page. He saw the loan application. He saw the default notice. He saw the screenshot of the email log sent to his account. The color drained from his face so fast it was like a light switch had been flipped. "What is this?" my mother asked, leaning over. She gasped. Chloe went still. She knew. She had always known. "That is a $45,000 business loan taken out in my name," I said, my voice steady and cold. Forged signature, fraudulent application, and the collection notices I sent to Dad. "Grace, wait," my father started, his voice cracking. "I can explain." "You knew," I said. "You knew she stole my identity. And instead of telling me, instead of fixing it, you tried to move her into my house to hide the evidence." "We were protecting the family," my mother wailed. "She made a mistake. She was young. We couldn't let her go to jail." "So you decided to let me pay the price," I said. "You decided my credit, my career, my life was acceptable, collateral damage. We were going to pay it back," Chloe shouted, tears streaming down her face now. "I just needed time. Why do you have to ruin everything?" "I didn't ruin anything," I said. "I just turned on the lights." The room was silent. The power dynamic had flipped so violently it was dizzying. My father, usually the authority, the loud voice, slumped in his chair. He looked small, weak. I watched him crumble and realized I was witnessing the illusion of power of the empty wallet. For my entire life, my parents' authority had felt like a monolith, unshakable absolute. But that power wasn't real. It was an illusion rented with my compliance and subsidized by my silence. Their status as the heads of the family was entirely dependent on my willingness to play the subordinate. The moment I stopped funding their delusion emotionally and financially, their authority didn't just fade, it evaporated. They weren't leaders protecting a legacy. They were just people who had spent money they didn't have and moral capital they hadn't earned. Without me to prop them up, they were hollow. "Here are your options," I said, sliding a second document across the table. Option A. I file the police report I have drafted right here. Chloe is arrested for felony identity theft. You two are investigated for conspiracy and fraud. My mother sobbed. Aunt Patricia looked at her sister with pure disgust. Option B, I continued. You sign this. It is a legal assumption of debt. You, Robert, and Susan assume full legal responsibility for the loan. You pay it off immediately. You also sign this confession admitting to the fraud. If you ever contact me again, if you ever come near my property, if you ever speak my name to anyone, I hand the confession to the district attorney. Grace, please, my father whispered. We're your parents. Sign it, I said. Or I call the detective waiting in the lobby. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a demolition. With shaking hands, my father picked up the pen. He signed. My mother signed. Chloe, weeping, silently signed. Ryan collected the papers. This is legally binding, he said. The debt is yours. The timeline for repayment is 30 days. Get out, I said. They stood up. They looked like ghosts. They walked to the door, leaving the plastic container behind. Grace, Aunt Patricia said as the door clicked shut. You did good. I know, I said. 3 months later, it was spring. The light in the loft was different, sharper, cleaner, as if the air itself had been scrubbed of a lingering pollution. I was kneeling on the floor, a trowel in my hand. The vertical garden was coming back to life. I had decided against replacing the delicate orchids that Chloe had destroyed. Instead, I chose hardier varieties, ferns, ivy, pothos. Plants that could survive a harsh winter. Plants that could be cut back to the root and still come back greener, stronger, and wilder. The silence in the apartment wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a space that finally belonged to me wholly and completely. The fallout had been total. Aunt Patricia hadn't kept quiet. True to her word, she told the extended family everything. The theft, the cover-up, the betrayal. The social isolation of my parents was absolute. They had lost their standing as the good parents. They were pariahs at the country club, whispers at church. Chloe had moved back into their basement. Without my credit to leech off of, and with a massive debt repayment plan draining my parents' retirement savings, their world had shrunk to the size of their own consequences. They were stuck together in a house filled with resentment, unpaid bills, and the echo of the daughter they had driven away. I wiped the soil from my hands and stood back to admire the wall. It wasn't the same as before. It was better. It was resilient. I realized then that I hadn't lost a family. I had lost a parasite. I had severed a gangrenous limb to save the body, and the wound had healed into a scar that reminded me of my own capacity for survival. My ability to build, to design landscapes, to construct homes, to engineer lives had always been my superpower. For years, I had used it to build a shelter for them, reinforcing their walls while they tore down mine. Now I was building solely for myself. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline, the lights twinkling like distant stars. I poured a glass of wine, the good stuff, the bottle Chloe hadn't finished that night. I took a sip. It didn't taste like regret. It tasted like freedom. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to keep yourself from drowning, share freedom in the comments. Don't forget to follow for more stories of taking power back.